Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, co-host with us today from California. Daniel, good to have you with us.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you?
I'm doing fine. The country needs a little bit of help, and I wished I could help a little bit. I'll make my effort anyway. But we do get good vibes from a lot of people who tune us in and say, keep at it, keep at it. We need some information other than what's coming out on the boob tube, you know. But we're going to start off by quoting from a poll, which is rather, establishment, but it's information for us. We believe the information is legitimate and that it's not good news. And that comes from Gallup, and I think they did this just this week or so. Gallup poll, Americans' mental health hits 20-year low ahead of renewed lockdowns. We know that the lockdowns has been in the news and people have had mental problems from it. The kids are really suffering from it. And now the polling verifies this. There's actually a whole lot. And their point in the polling was they took it and made the point that more lockdowns. So might be that they don't believe it's a danger. It's just, good health. And we're promoting good health by deceiving everybody with the data that comes out telling them how sick people are and how many people die and how about the positive tests, and so much of that stuff is fudged. And this isn't. I think this is sort of a concession on both the pros and the cons on this vaccine and what's going on with the disease. But it is a hazard. There is no doubt about it. Everybody knows if they aren't feeling well and they're tied up in their house or can't go to work and can't get outside, it makes people a little bit nervous, and it makes a whole household nervous. And when kids are having trouble, that's an additional problem. But in this case, they've done this and they're surprised. But I don't think Fauci is going to deny it. Oh, I'm shocked. I didn't know it could be harmful. We didn't really check into this before we did it. Well, of course they didn't, but they shouldn't be doing it anyway, and then we wouldn't have these kind of problems. But this is something, Daniel, I think is a revelation to some degree that will help us understand. Maybe these people will back off a little bit, but so far, there are many more joining us and saying, there's something awfully fishy about this whole lockdown business. The people who want it and demand it, the mayor of New York City and other places, they love it. It gives them a job. Oh boy, they need me. I'm the smartest man in the city. I'm the smartest man in the state. And we are going to really help people. So they're not going to respond to information such as this to show that maybe they're going in the wrong direction. I think, Daniel, probably the only thing that's going to really turn this around, and we're starting to see it, is the people have to stand out and speak out and resist what is happening to them.
Yeah, Dr. Paul, and this is a survey that the Gallup organization has been doing for the past 20 years. It's the Health and Healthcare Survey that they see how Americans are doing. And this year is the worst for mental health since they have started doing the survey. From 2019 to 2020, the percentage of people who respond that they are in excellent mental health has dropped from 43% last year to 34% this year. Again, the lowest it's ever been. So you're seeing a mental health crisis in the United States, and it is caused by the lockdowns, a sense of isolation, the sense that you have no ability to affect your life and self is in control. Interestingly enough, Dr. Paul, among the respondents, Democrats and frequent churchgoers are reporting the least change in their mental health. So obviously this mental health crisis has a political component. We might chalk it up to the coronavirus related attacks on the Trump administration. White Republicans are hit the hardest according to the poll. But it's not just this poll, and we saw this article on the FEE website, and we will urge people to have a look at that. But 1 in 4 Americans young Americans have considered suicide this past summer. It's an absolute epidemic. I just saw yesterday a young man, a young high school football player, committed suicide, and he said the isolation of the lockdown drove him to it. And we know that the crisis in suicides and mental health is not due to the pandemic, but due to the lockdowns, because
I guess we've lost him.
Yes.
We have lost Daniel for now. Maybe we can get him back again. But he was explaining this Gallup poll, which I mentioned and introduced the program with, and it's a serious problem, and it demonstrates that the people who promote all this nonsense either aren't aware or they don't want to be aware, and they just march on. But there is a case that's going on right now. Matter of fact, there was a ruling in LA by a judge that in a way fits into all this mismanagement of thing. There's a judge that sides with the restaurant people about outdoor dining because they filed a suit, and the judge ruled that the LA County, by closing down, was arbitrary. Of course it was arbitrary. Everything they're doing is arbitrary. There's essentially no properly passed laws. Most of it is by executive orders and county judges and people just at local levels deciding, well, let's do this. But this was taken. There was a lawsuit, and it was ruling by the county that they overstepped their bound. So here we are winning bits and pieces of this, and I think that is very good. Even though the numbers stack up, if you take a poll tomorrow or today, you'd find out that we're not winning this fight at the moment, but we're making progress. And when we see a judge doing this, of course, we applaud him because he's at least ruling on the truth of the matter. And of course, the county officials acted arbitrarily. I mean, it made no sense to close down. There are thousands of people put out of work, and there's so much arbitrariness of all these cases. How the little guys are suffering a lot more than the big guys. The big companies have done well, and even when it comes to passing legislation and bailing these people out, guess what? The little guy's not getting the bailout as much as the wealthy. But the whole thing is we shouldn't be doing it. We shouldn't be dependent on bailouts. We should be dependent on free people acting in their own behest. And this is something that, for all the problems we put up with, I think most of what we have suffered this past year has been government created. If you look at what the Fed has done, and you say, well, that's impossible. The virus came from the creator right out of the sky and did the problem. Well, a lot of people don't buy into that, and I don't buy into it either. I don't deny the fact that there's a virus, and it's very serious, and we have to do something about it. It's just that what has been done is, like in this case, they do it arbitrarily. They're not fair. They're incapable of doing it. They take the responsibility away from the landowners or the restaurant people or whatever, and they just march on and do it whatever they think. So that is where the real problem is that the people believe that the government will do this in their behest and they'll take care of them, and I think that is where the real problem is. Depending on government to make the decision and make everybody safe and secure. It's the worst thing in the world, is that the role of safety and security and happiness is a role of government, which it isn't. The government should be protecting our liberties and allowing people to take care of themselves. But no, they're in the problem, in the job of taking care of people. And probably the worst circumstances is when government gets involved. This does not necessarily apply to the case of the COVID, but it's when the government's moved in to make people safe from themselves. that is really overstepping the bound. Yes, I can see that people should be, there should be some police action when people are being shot at and killed like they are in the inner cities of this country, even as we speak. But when it comes to deciding that people don't take care of themselves, they don't take care of their medical needs. Some of them would want to take chloroquine, for this, and everybody knows that you shouldn't do that. Well, maybe some people decide they do that. No, government has to make you safe. So therefore, we will work on this whole subject of quarantines, and then we will have vaccines, and of course, this leads to a lot of shortcomings. But anyway, we had that favorable ruling, in the LA County. And the Gallup poll shows us just more stuff to worry about, and not that we have to search for that. We need to worry because too much of this is being controlled by government and bureaucrats, and they always have an axe to grind. But there was another story today that I think that I'd like to mention, and is it true that Daniel may be back with us?
I think I'm back, Dr. Polo. Sorry about that. I was dropped the call.
Okay, I'm getting ready to talk about the allergic reactions.
Yeah, that's important.
The Pfizer actually admitted it. Two very, very serious, and they used the word anaphylaxis. It wasn't total anaphylaxis because that kills you. But it was very, very serious and very, very dangerous. Enough to put a warning out. If you're allergic to stuff, you better not get the vaccine. But that's a big if, especially when they're trying to get millions and millions of people tested, and they're talking about mixing vaccines and all this. Yes, it is dangerous, but this is not the way vaccines are generally distributed. It's been politically controlled, and it's a blame game. Who are we going to blame? The Republicans or the Democrats for doing all this? And yet they march on. But I think, Daniel, this is serious. This is just the opening. How long have they been giving vaccine shots? Not very long, and yet they've had serious side effects, and there will be some others. Daniel?
Yeah, they just started yesterday in the United Kingdom giving out the vaccine, and it was the UK health authority that issued the warning that if you have serious allergies, you should not get the COVID vaccine manufactured by Pfizer. And the reason why people are troubled by this is because the warning was rather vague. Everyone is allergic to something. Most people in the world have something they're allergic to. So there's no real specific guidelines for people whether they should take it or not. And I think this is going to certainly undermine the interest and willingness of people around the world, and certainly in the United States, to take the vaccine. And that's going to pose a problem for people who, they want to force the vaccine on people. And as we know, there are a lot of people who have their fingers in the pie who stand to make a lot of money by giving out hundreds of millions of doses of this. But it really does speak, and I think this is one of the failures of the Trump administration, is putting all of its force and all of its weight in this Operation Warp Speed. As you know better than anyone, Dr. Paul, vaccines and things of this nature, they don't work that way. It's not Deus Vult. You don't just hey, God wills it, and here's the vaccine. These things take some time, and we're now seeing some of the challenges that are taking place when you rush things. And I think it's if you go, like you say, anaphylaxis, that's a pretty serious thing. So yeah, the UK government says, hang on, don't get it if you've got allergies. The rest of the world is saying, what?
All right. Daniel, I want to talk a little bit about an article that you and I talked about a little bit before, and that's written by Don Boudreau. And he has an interesting title because it caught my attention. It says he wants people, and he makes the point, drop it's guided by science pretext. Nothing could be truer than that. That is such a pretext. Everybody's declaring scientists, your scientists against my scientists. And the problem is once you take something like health matters that's financed by the government and it's politicized, all of a sudden the natural consequence will be that they will declare that they are the scientific experts, because people aren't going to believe in them. People can't go out and say, I have a political position that we ought to do this, even though that's exactly what they're doing. They're promoting their political position, which could be critiqued a lot easier. So what do they say? Oh, it's the science, and we're the great scientists. And then we have the media and a lot of social media, which determines which is scientific, which is not. And that's the whole point that Don makes here, is let's just quit this stuff. And of course, that's my goal, is to quit this nonsense of turning these responsibilities over to government and having them make these decisions. Because this should not surprise people that all of a sudden there's two interpretations of science, two interpretations of vaccines, two interpretations of drugs, the antibiotics, and the way you treat people. I don't remember any of that when I went to medical school, that we were supposed to sort this out politically. Oh, are you going to use the drug the Republicans like or the drugs the Democrats like? The whole thing is just quit using this, which will not be easy, because the people have become very, very dependent, on the government. And that is why some of us for years have argued the case that this is going to lead to bad medicine, and it's going to lead to an undermining of our liberty. And just look at what's happening here. The perfect example of undermining our liberties and really ruining medicine, and people don't even know. Now you're considered a traitor to your country if you say, you know what, I don't think you ought to take any of these vaccines that look like they're dangerous. Well, you're in trouble if you start talking like that. And that's the kind of attitude that we're trying to prevent. That's why, Daniel, I was glad to see Don's article about this. Let's just drop this whole idea, guided by scientists. Until we're able to believe all the politicians and all the politicians who have picked their special scientists, right now I would say forget about this. Let's just look around for some honest politicians that aren't involved, honest scientists who aren't interested in politics.
And one of the things that Boudreaux points out in his article is that the political leaders are doing opposite things, and both claiming that science is driving them. He points out Governor Beshear in Kentucky, who's shut down in-person learning from K to 12. Well, and he says it's the science. Well, there are even New York City, de Blasio has had to open schools because parents went nuts when he was trying to shut them down again. So they're doing things that are at odds with each other, that are arbitrary, that are in conflict with each other, that are just purely illogical. And we know that for children, as again, Fauci said that young people aren't getting it, they're not a danger, and they're not spreading it, yet still they shut the schools. So no matter what they do, even if it's arbitrary, it makes no sense, they claim it's the science. It's a kind of a voodoo, it's kind of a witch doctor mentality. It really is a sort of a pre-medieval mentality that you some sort of shaman from the sky is guiding these, when in fact it is really for the most part, it's just political ambition and the desire to dominate, I think, that's guiding them, Dr. Paul.
Yeah. Daniel, before we close, I want to go over another item, and then you and I can close. But this is off the subject of the vaccines, and it's about an political appointment, and it's about foreign policy and what goes on there. Something that we've talked a little bit less about this because of the pressing nature of how quickly the election news and COVID news and the attack on civil liberties, it was moving, that we talked a lot about that. But the item I want to mention now regarding an appointment, and it's the appointment for Secretary of State.
Secretary of Defense. Lloyd Austin.
Yeah, and this was politicized at first because they were arguing, and it's probably good that the Democrats are arguing over this. Should we have a good progressive, or should we have a black person, or should we have an Indian, and this sort of thing, what we should have in. So Biden picks the board member, Austin, and this will be debated among Democrats as well as Republicans, but some of the Republicans may well like him, because generally, whether it's the Republicans or Democrats in the Defense Department is always essentially always headed up by somebody from the military-industrial complex. And where does Austin come from? From Raytheon. And that's what happens when the Republicans are in. So, the Republican and Democrats are fighting tooth and nail, and they should, because it's so disastrous. But when it comes to this, I mean, if you don't vote for the money, and if you don't vote because the military-industrial complex is in charge, and we don't want them to be, it leads to more trouble. So this is a big thing that they're arguing about right now. But it's going to be pretty hard for me to say, oh, it's okay, the argument is good. We'll end up with somebody who's independent money. He's going to be independent-minded, and he's going to be defending a system where we can have a little bit of national defense and not policemen of the world.
Yeah, it is. It sort of bolsters the old saying of Tom Woods: no matter who you vote for, you get John McCain. Because Lloyd Austin, he's a retired military, he has to get a special waiver because he hasn't been out of the military long enough. But as you point out, he is on the board of Raytheon. And guess what? His predecessor, Mark Esper, who was Trump's defense secretary, was a lobbyist for Raytheon. So no matter who you vote for, you get Raytheon in charge. And I think that if you look at what Austin's background is, he was the commander of the Central Command between 2013 and 2016. He was the military person in charge of the Middle East area in that period. Well, what happened in that time period? Well, we had the Syria disaster where we armed jihadists and tried to overthrow a government and ended up killing tons of people. Libya, absolute complete disaster. All of these disasters happened on his watch as the commander of the Central Command. The only people who benefited from these disastrous military misadventures are people like Raytheon, or companies like Raytheon, or the military-industrial complex. So Joe Biden here is signaling to the military-industrial complex, to Raytheon, hey guys, I got your back. Don't worry. The money's going to keep flowing. It doesn't matter who is elected. So it really is, he may not be as bad as Michelle Flournoy, who had been floated as a potential, but certainly when it comes to changing our policies, some of the things that Trump tried to do with mixed results, removing troops from Afghanistan, the Middle East, for example, we're not going to see any of that now under this new administration.
Right, and I'm going to go ahead and close, Daniel, because we've gone over these things, and we complain about what we don't like, and we're implying that there are different ways. And the one point I'd like to make is that, and I've made it before, and that is that it's more than just a change in the bureaucracy. It's not just changing who's heading up these departments or who's running the medical, the government medical program, who's going to distribute the vaccines. And that'll be all politics, and they'll be arguing back and forth. But it has to be a lot more than that. I compare it to, about the Federal Reserve. People have asked me over the years, Ron, if you had a chance, would they appoint you chairman of the Federal Reserve, or who would you put in the Federal Reserve? And the truth is, it's not going to make that much difference. Matter of fact, right now, it's you have to get rid of the monetary program that we have now. This whole system of just printing money like crazy and having zero interest rates and running up debt. I mean, that's much bigger than just changing who's running the show. And that's the way it is on these medical programs. Let's say the distribution of the vaccine doesn't go well, which is always possible because that's a big project that they have going on. So they would say, well, we need to change the manager. We need a better manager and get these vaccines out. But that isn't the solution. The whole thing is we've devised a system that is inefficient. It's not going to solve our problems the way it's going. And we need this whole concept where people are in charge and people outside of the government. But when the bureaucrats get in charge and the politicians get in charge, then they're motivated by special interests, profiteering, the medical industrial complex. There is so much going on there, and also the the people then will see that the main goal, just as it is in the military industrial complex, is just profiteering, and then they overstep their bounds. So everything is directed toward a political appearance of what they're doing, and that's why the Faucis of the world will come across and they say, well, why did you do that? Look at what it has done. It's caused unemployment and people are suffering. Oh, we really didn't give it much consideration. Of course they don't. They're not. That's not the reason they're there. Do you think Bill Gates is there for really making a smooth transition into a libertarian society, which would be so much better? Not likely. So it's a bigger problem, a bigger picture. It's philosophic, and it's the decision that the people of this country have to make is, do the American people really want to live in a free society and assume the responsibility for themselves and for their families, or are they going to demand that anything that happens, if there's any insecurity or any need, the government can take care of it? Well, who in the world is the government? The government's just, they operate by stealing from the people, and that makes a poor country, and that's where we're moving toward. That's why socialism gets so poor, is because the destruction of the productive element of the society is destroyed. And this is what we're doing. We're witnessing the conclusion of government intervention in programs like this, and that's why we should be very, very concerned, and it's very, very hard. Where it really, really bugs me is when you hear the stories, thousands and thousands of people put out of work, and it's by lockdowns. And but the lockdown it's all done in the name of glory and taking care of people, and this is what is necessary. And don't be so unpatriotic. This is so sad of what they've done, and yet at the same time, the same people could be down the street or around the block getting huge bailouts and not hurt at all. But the little guys get punished and they lose their jobs, and now they're starting to fight out, and that's what's going to be necessary. They have to fight back, and they have to challenge these lockdowns, like this person did in LA. He challenged them and said that they didn't take it into consideration how dangerous this was. The only way they're going to take into consideration before they do harm is that enough American people speak out and defend the policies of liberty. Daniel, would you like to make a closing statement, or are we ready to close?
I'm ready to close, Dr. Paul, but I would just say one thing that, as we said from the beginning, as people have said, like Alex Berenson on Twitter, the virus is going to virus. We're seeing that there's already been a peak in the Midwest of this seasonal flu, seasonal virus. They're not measuring the flu anymore. Everything is COVID, but we're seeing a peak in the Midwest. If you look at the numbers are going irrespective of lockdown policies, of mask policies, and other things. This virus is going to virus. It's going to do its thing. All California and states like that have done by instituting these extremely harmful measures is simply to delay the inevitable and to help ensure that people who are most vulnerable may actually get the disease by not letting it go through the layers of society that are really not susceptible to getting very sick. So this is a disaster of our politicians making, and hopefully they someday will pay for it.
Very good, Daniel, and we'll keep the fight going to try to restore a freedom to this country and the goals that we seek, peace and prosperity. But I do want to thank our viewers for tuning in, because that makes all the difference in the world. We welcome your comments, and we welcome the notion that many of you spread the word, and you do, and that's why our numbers keep growing. Our numbers growing, they're not like gigantic, but they're good. And they're always better than they were, and that means more people are listening, and I know they are spreading the message of liberty. That is our goal. Please tune in to the Liberty Report soon.